Breaking news on Wednesday afternoon, LSU true freshman quarterback Walker Howard has decided to enter the transfer portal. Now, what does that mean for his future moving forward? And more importantly, what does that mean for LSU football and its quarterback room moving forward? We'll get into all of that plus so much more on today's edition of Locked on LSU.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Plus, we're on YouTube as well. So you can listen on the go. You can also watch on YouTube, Locked on LSU. And of course, we are part of the Locked on Network, your team every day. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I am your host, as I am every day. I graduated from LSU. I've been covering LSU sports since 2016, and I'm now a sports talk radio host in Nashville, Tennessee. But Wednesday afternoon, got a bomb dropped, breaking news, true freshman quarterback Walker Howard has decided to enter the transfer portal. Now, I think that this move is fairly surprising for two reasons. First being, Brian Kelly told us less than 2 weeks ago in his post-game press conference after the Citrus Bowl that he didn't expect a move like this to happen. This was Brian Kelly post-game.
I absolutely 100% believe that all three quarterbacks are going to be with us, and all of them we've had conversations with, and feel that that's the direction we're going.
Okay, so this was after the Citrus Bowl. This is January 2nd. Today's January 11th. Brian Kelly said, "I feel absolutely confident that we can carry all three quarterbacks into spring practice." Now, what changed there? Was Brian Kelly and the rest of the coaching staff, when they were doing their postseason exit interviews, was it, that Walker Howard really was completely bought in and fully intended to come back to LSU in 2023, and maybe he had a change of heart? Maybe something changed for him, whether that be a reevaluation, whether that be an NIL deal, I don't know. Did something change with Walker Howard? Did something change within his relationships within the coaching staff, his belief in this team? And I don't know the answer to that question. Or did Brian Kelly not actually feel 100% confident that they were going to carry all three quarterbacks going into spring ball? If he didn't mean that, honestly, I don't know why he'd say it. I think a lot of times, we'll get coach speak, and we'll get plenty of coaches that don't tell the 100% truth at the podium, and that sometimes it's the best thing for the football team. But I don't know what benefit Brian Kelly would get out of saying that he feels fully confident that all quarterbacks are going to be carried into spring ball. If he didn't feel that way, he wouldn't have to say that. But he wouldn't have to directly say, "Oh, I feel super confident about it." Because once I heard that, I thought, okay, these conversations that we're having about Jayden Daniels and Garrett Nusmeyer and Walker Howard, at least Brian Kelly feels comfortable with all three of them. The second reason why I'm pretty surprised by this move is because I didn't think it was going to be Walker Howard. When Jayden Daniels made his decision to come back to LSU, I thought that was a net positive thing. It's a good thing. I think, Brian Kelly even told you Jayden Daniels is going to be your starting quarterback going into 2023. I don't understand why that's a decision that's met with so much vitriol by LSU fans, but to each their own. I won't yuck your yum. But when Jayden Daniels decided to make that move, I thought, okay, you have Jayden Daniels coming back, Garrett Nusmeyer, who I can only imagine wants to play a larger role. He's been in college football for 2 years, had a great opportunity against Georgia in the SEC championship, and looked good, played well against Purdue in the Citrus Bowl. Then you've got Walker Howard, a true freshman who's getting buried on the depth chart for yet another year. And then you've also got Rickie Collins coming in the 2023 class. I thought that's a whole lot of cooks in the kitchen. I wouldn't be surprised to see one of those quarterbacks transfer. But truth be told, I thought it was going to be Garrett Nusmeyer, because I thought that was going to be the quarterback that thought, look, I want to start now. I've proven that I can be a starting quarterback in college football, and I want to do that now. I want to be a starter now. I want to start building my NFL draft resume this season. And honestly, I wouldn't have blamed Garrett Nusmeyer for that. I wouldn't have liked it. I think that LSU's quarterback situation and quarterback room would have been in a much more vulnerable and uncomfortable spot if Garrett Nussmeier did decide to transfer away. But I wouldn't have blamed him. I'm surprised that it was Walker Howard because normally I attribute players transferring for one of two reasons. One being, the coach gets fired, coach leaves, and that player doesn't want to be at a school where he's coached by a coach that didn't recruit him. And I get that. Or maybe there was a system change, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator change, whatever, so on and so forth. There's a coaching change, and that player no longer aligns with the system or beliefs of that new coaching staff. Two is they want more playing time, and they're not getting more playing time, and they don't see a path for more playing time. And that normally means to me that they deserve to have playing time right now. Walker Howard's a true freshman. We saw very, very little of Walker Howard this season. He came in against Southern, didn't attempt to pass in that game, and then came in, of course, in the fourth quarter against Purdue in the Citrus Bowl. He's 2 for 4, 7 passing yards. Very, very minimal, teeny tiny, itty bitty little sample size from Walker Howard. Nothing that I would look to say, oh, wow, this is a quarterback that has proved himself, that could be a starter in college football, but there's just not a spot for him this year. That's kind of how I viewed Garrett Nusmeyer. If Garrett Nusmeyer did decide to transfer, hey, he's proved that he's got one heck of an arm. He's got a ton of talent. He's a really good, promising young quarterback. We just haven't seen enough of Walker Howard. And I didn't think that Walker Howard, after just 1 year of, I can only imagine that he was promised, hey, look, you're going to ride the bench your first year because that's what's best for the development of you. That's the way the privilege that this quarterback room had in 2022 of Jayden Daniels was our starter, Garrett Nusmeyer could be our backup, and you can learn. And then you can work up to a starting spot. It happens all the time in college football. Very rarely do you see a true freshman, unless you're Bryce Young, get a starting opportunity like that. So I thought bolting after 1 year would maybe be a premature decision by Walker Howard. So that's why it was a surprise to me, is because I didn't expect Walker Howard to make that decision after just 1 year. Now, I'm not criticizing that decision. I have said it so many times before in this podcast, and I'll say it so many times again. If there's a better opportunity for you elsewhere, go for it. Go get it. Go chase your opportunity. Go chase your bag. I just didn't expect it to happen after only 1 year, especially considering it's a local kid. But coming up next, what does LSU's quarterback room look like in 2023? Is LSU's quarterback room still set up for success? Let's get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about betonline.net. Y'all know how much I love betonline.net. It's your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional, college, amateur league out there. You name it, they've got it. They've got pro football, college bowl season, basketball, both NBA and at the college level. They've got it all at betonline.net. So if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at betonline as well. Always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Make sure that you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything that you need to know about college basketball all in one place. Plus, you can hear from big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So the big news of the day, Walker Howard, true freshman quarterback that really spent his true freshman season, his redshirt freshman season, just observing, learning, getting reps when he can get them, but developing into the system, having a year under his belt to just learn. And I think that's an incredibly valuable experience for a young quarterback. I mean, it's the most important position in team sports for a reason, because it's not a very easy position to play, especially for a player that has zero college football experience. I think we all agree it's a good thing for Walker Howard to be able to sit back and learn. But sometimes, whenever you have so much depth, that's always a great thing. You want depth. But sometimes it's a double edged sword because too much depth might push players away when it's so easy to enter the transfer portal, when it's so easy to say, hey, I'm buried in the depth chart here. I won't be over here. So Walker Howard has decided to transfer. Now, how does LSU's quarterback room look in 2023? As is, now that Walker Howard has decided to enter the transfer portal, as is, you have Jayden Daniels, who Brian Kelly has already said in his post-game press conference after the Citrus Bowl, Jayden Daniels is the starting quarterback moving forward. However, it's still going to be he said it's not going to be a quarterback controversy. I hate using that word. I'd rather use competition. He said while he's not labeling it a quarterback competition controversy, he said that every single quarterback within this room is going to get opportunity to prove themselves. So where the room is now, Jayden Daniels for now is the starter, named the starter, but of course, open to competition. Garrett Nusmeyer is your backup. Walker Howard transferred out. You got Rickie Collins coming in the 2023 class. I think Rickie Collins will follow a very similar role in his first year that Walker Howard had in his first year, with hopefully not transferring at the end of it. Of you learn, you get in this, you learn the system, you learn the coaches learn you, you get comfortable with the receivers, you hold a clipboard and you observe. You're a sponge in your first year. So that's what the quarterback room is looking like. You got a starter, you got a really solid backup that could potentially compete for a starting job in 2023, and then you've got the young guy in Rickie Collins who can be developed for the future. So even without Walker Howard, this LSU quarterback room is still set up for success. This LSU quarterback room still has enough depth, enough talent, and enough experience to be able to be competitive in the 2023 season. Now, it's still pretty crushing to lose a player and a quarterback, a competitor like Walker Howard. Walker Howard was the top-ranked dual threat quarterback in the 2023 class. Walker Howard was a 5-star quarterback coming out of high school. You don't lose that kind of talent and be totally fine. You don't lose that kind of talent and it's not at least a little bit crushing to your program. I was really excited about Walker Howard. I would say in the 2022 class, I was honestly most excited about Will Campbell, to be completely honest with you. Yeah, big O-line girl. I was most excited about Will Campbell, but Walker Howard was a really close second. Not only because of his how much he was praised, because I've never watched Walker Howard. I never watched him in high school. So I can't say that, wow, watching him light it up on Friday night, super excited about it. But how can you not be excited about a 5-star dual threat quarterback that ranks statistically at the top of his class? How do you not get excited about that guy? I was excited about Walker Howard potentially being the quarterback of the future. And it's not just because of how much he was praised in high school. It's also because how much Brian Kelly praised him. He was asked about Walker Howard in a few press conferences throughout the season, spring ball, training camp, and also throughout the season. And Brian Kelly said that they were really encouraged and really excited about what they had seen from Walker Howard. And I wanted to see that come to fruition. So it absolutely is crushing to lose a promising young player, a player that has proven to be incredibly talented, and a player that I can only imagine this LSU coaching staff viewed to be the future of the offense. They were going to build the offense around Walker Howard and his ability. Not just his arm talent and his arm ability, but also his ability to make plays on the run. I viewed Walker Howard as almost like the perfect combination of Jayden Daniels and Garrett Nusmeyer. And maybe that's not a fair assessment, but on a pretty surface level, he has the arm of Garrett Nusmeyer. Maybe he doesn't have the scramble ability or the speed or the elusiveness that Jayden Daniels had. Maybe not quite to that level. But in a perfect marriage between Jayden Daniels and Garrett Nusmeyer, that's kind of how I saw Walker Howard. And who wouldn't be excited about that? So that's the difficult dichotomy that I am looking at with the LSU quarterback room is it's still fine. You still got plenty of depth. You got plenty of experience. You're still going to be able to develop your potential quarterback of the future. But you're still losing a really talented player. And the caveat here is just because Walker Howard has entered the transfer portal doesn't mean that Garrett Nusmeyer won't. I will slam the panic button if Garrett Nusmeyer decides to transfer out of LSU. Now, I'd be even more surprised about that if after Brian Kelly says less than 2 weeks ago that he feels 100% confident that all 3 quarterbacks will be retained in the spring, and 2 of those 3 quarterbacks transfer, I will be floored. But if Garrett Nusmeyer decides to transfer and joining Walker Howard and entering the transfer portal, you're effed. You're effed. Because you can't go into the 2023 season with Jayden Daniels as your starting quarterback and Rickie Collins, a true freshman with 0 college experience, as your backup. And that is no disrespect to Rickie Collins whatsoever. But what have I said several times in this podcast already? It behooves so many young quarterbacks to sit back and learn and get ready for your starting opportunity. This team would be royally screwed if Jayden Daniels, say, goes down with an ankle injury in the SEC championship and the backup has to come in. Crazier things have happened. So what LSU would have to do is go into the transfer portal and find another backup quarterback, which good luck with that. Because one, how many quarterbacks are entering the transfer portal just to be buried on the depth chart yet again, just to be a backup? And what kind of quality of quarterback are you going to get as a backup behind Jayden Daniels? Not saying that he'd be a bad player, not saying it's not worth your while, but I'm saying the quality of that quarterback room would plummet if both Garrett Nusmeyer and Walker Howard decide to transfer. So knock on all the wood. Keep your fingers crossed that doesn't happen. For right now, as is currently constructed in the quarterback room, Jayden Daniels, Garrett Nusmeyer, and Rickie Collins coming into the 2023 class, I think you feel okay about that. I will panic if Garrett Nusmeyer decides to transfer, but I'm not going to panic about it, something that hasn't happened yet. So while this quarterback room is going to be okay, it's still a really big blow to lose Walker Howard. Now, coming up next, it is a Mailbag Wednesday. Y'all sent in your questions, and I appreciate that. So we'll get into those questions coming up next. It's a Mailbag Wednesday. Let's get it. Let's get into it. The first question that I saw, it actually came on YouTube. So remember, I do a Mailbag Wednesday every single week, every Wednesday. Feel free to send your questions in via YouTube. If you're watching the YouTube page, just comment down below. You can tweet them at me at CarolineFenton1 or at LockedOnLSU. You can tweet them. You can DM them. However you want to send me your questions, I would be glad to take them. But this first question is coming in from Jed. It says, I hate to be negative, not my biased opinions, just facts. Why can't LSU recruit at a higher level when it comes to defensive tackles and corners? Last time I checked, they are the most important positions on the defensive side of the ball. That's why LSU will struggle at times. If you expect to beat Georgia with less talented players on that side of the ball, you have to recruit like them. And I think it's a very fair question. And I don't want to say that LSU can't recruit those positions at a very high level. LSU has a very, very good reputation at recruiting and developing players at those positions. There's a reason why LSU is DBU. But also, that is a reputation that maybe hasn't been upheld by LSU over the past few years. So, to kind of play into that question and also, go back and forth and debate that question, LSU has signed the sixth ranked corner in the country in Jayden Toviano, a 4-star or 5-star, whichever, recruiting platform you look at, 4 or 5-star corner in Jayden Toviano coming in the 2023 class. And I know that transfer portal isn't necessarily like when you think recruiting, you don't think transfer portal, but also look at Denver Harris, a former 5-star corner, one of the top corner prospects in the 2022 class. LSU is bringing him in the transfer portal class going into 2023. But all of that being said, while LSU is picking up some big-time cornerback talent, I say Jayden Toviano is the 6th ranked corner in the country, and he's a great player. In the top 5, 2 of those players have committed to Alabama, Desmond Ricks and Jahil Hurley. Desmond Ricks that's just going to eat me up inside. I'm so sad about Desmond Ricks going to Alabama and not to LSU when everybody predicted that he was going to LSU, but I digress. So of the top 5, 2 of those of those 5 had committed to Alabama and 1 to Georgia. A.J. Harris, a 5-star corner out of Alabama. So out of like a city of Alabama. So that's the tough thing, is even though LSU did get top corner talent, top 10 corner talent, one of the best cornerbacks in this class, Alabama and Georgia, who have now emerged as the gold standards of the SEC, have gotten better or have gotten more. And in terms of defensive line talent, LSU has a bunch of talented defensive linemen coming in this class. 4-star Deshaun Womack, one of the top edge rushers in this class, the top recruit out of the state of Maryland. You also look at Jackson Howard, a 4-star edge rusher out of Minnesota. You also look at all of these other defensive linemen that LSU is either bringing in via the transfer portal or in the recruiting class. But also, if you look at some of the top defensive linemen in this 2023 class, top 20, top 25, LSU isn't in there. Those players are going to the Alabamas and the Georgias. Those players aren't going to LSU. The top-ranked defensive line prospect in the country, David Hicks out of Katy, Texas, 5 stars going to Texas A&M. The second highest ranked defensive lineman in the country, James Smith out of Montgomery, Alabama, he's going to Alabama. The 7th ranked defensive lineman in the country, Jordan Renaud, 4-star defensive lineman out of Texas, Alabama. 9th ranked defensive lineman, 4-star defensive lineman out of Florida, is going to Georgia. Keldrick Falk, a 4-star defensive lineman out of Alabama, is going to Auburn. And then I continue to scroll and look through the rankings by each position group of defensive linemen and corners. And I look at the defensive linemen and the rankings, and it's a lot of Texas and Auburn and Alabama and Florida and Oregon and even Notre Dame and South Carolina, and no LSU. So while I don't think that question is completely fair, that LSU can't recruit top talent at the cornerback and defensive line positions, I do think that there's maybe a fair point there. That a school that has such a wonderful tradition of producing defensive players, specifically defensive backs and defensive linemen, LSU needs to start bringing in the top talent. And look, recruiting is hard. You're not going to land the top recruit at every single position. You're not going to have 5 stars at every single position, especially when you're competing against the best schools in the country. In Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State, and the players that you're recruiting that you want to bring into your program, well, so does Alabama, so does Georgia, so does Texas A&M, so does Florida, so does Tennessee, so does Auburn. So it's hard. It's hard to bring in this top talent, especially when you're doing it with a second-year head coach. But you're going to have to start bringing in more of those 5 stars if you want to compete with the 4 and the 5 stars that are committing to Alabama and to Georgia. You're going to have to bring more in. Now, giving a little bit of grace, considering that this is Brian Kelly's second recruiting class, that this is Brian Kelly's second year, that Brian Kelly and this entire coaching staff is going to continue to build a reputation that will bring in 4 and 5 stars without even having to do the heavy lifting. That's the point where Alabama is, and that Georgia, I think, probably is. And if they're not there, they're getting there. That if Kirby Smart or Nick Saban walks into your house for a recruiting visit, you don't need to be sold. You already know what those programs represent. You already know what those programs are. And I think we all know what this LSU program is too. It's an elite program in college football. But when you're a 17-year-old kid being courted by, a Nick Saban with 7 national title rings, and then you look at Brian Kelly, he's only in his second year at LSU, give him some time to establish what he can do at LSU. So giving grace to Brian Kelly to allow him some time to establish this program, but also understanding that if you want to establish this program and consistently compete against the Alabamas and Georgias every single year, that starts with recruiting. The second question on a Mailbag Wednesday comes from somebody that asks, why can't LSU retain players like Alabama can? This question came right after the news that Walker Howard was going to enter the transfer portal. And I'm looking at it like, I'm not surprised that in a quarterback room that's going to have 4 really talented players, that one of those is probably going to want to leave. But I think this person asking the question means, well, Alabama has a stacked room. Georgia, same thing, has stacked rooms in almost every single position group. So why are those players staying? And LSU is having a really hard time retaining players. And I don't think that's necessarily a very fair critique, considering every player transfers for their own reason. Sometimes that reason is, I don't see any opportunity to start. So I'm going to go somewhere else where I can start, and that's fair. Sometimes it's for NIL. Sometimes it's because they were promised something that they didn't get. And I don't mean that as like a specific example about LSU. It's just an overarching statement on college football as a whole and players who decide to transfer as a whole. But Alabama and Georgia, I go back to what I said last time. Alabama and Georgia are proven commodities, at least in the recent history. I know that LSU had the 2019 season, but 2020 and 2021 absolutely are smudges on LSU's resume as a program. So they're going to need time to build things back up. You're going to need time to prove to players, hey, you are going to want to be a part of this. You are not going to want to leave this. But sometimes it's not even about LSU. Sometimes it's not even about the program. Sometimes it's about players just wanting other opportunities. Players transfer out of Alabama too. Alabama, I believe, has 15 players that have entered the transfer portal so far, and the transfer portal is still open for about another 2 weeks. So it's not just a problem exclusive to LSU. Of course, you want to keep your good players in. You want to keep your talented players in your program. But it happens to everyone. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen today. For your second listen, check out our brand new podcast, Locked on College Basketball. Experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything that you need to know on and off the court. Plus, hear from big name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked on College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.